Hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation, Cities to See, Transforming Urban Challenges into Coastal Opportunities. I'm so excited and privileged to be here with you all, and we have an esteemed group of panelists sitting over here. We have representation, and for those in the audience and those online, if you want to put where you're calling in from, and those in the audience, if you want to raise your hand when I name the continent that our presenters are representing. So we have representation from South America, North America, Europe, and Africa. And for those online, please let us know where you're zooming in from too. And we also have representation from Asia online. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Gina Mukherjee. She's going to give a talk on what we're doing here today. So thank you, Dr. Gina.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and heartfelt gratitude to World Water Week for organizing this, and especially for this particular session, which is S2S, cities and S2S approach, source to sea. And I would also like to extend my special thanks to my collaborator but friend, Flor Lafayette-Michoud, and the topic that I have chosen to discuss is what I call more than urban blue humanities. And how and why, S2S, source to sea approach, I feel is imperative. It's crucial to help us come up with this framework of more than urban blue humanities. And why do we need it? So this is the locus of the presentation. Now, coming to these two publications, which are recent publications. So one is by Sunil Amrit, who is an Asian historian, but who definitely uses interdisciplinary approach and who had captured a lot about Asian, but also more than Asian oceans, seas, and the other book that he wrote like 2-3 years back is also Crossing the Bay, because there is also some less discussions. This Atlantic is again the ocean space, which has been explored to a great extent, because ocean studies has also remained to a great extent Eurocentric. So now what is happening is that ocean studies, scholarship is pouring in, where scholars from the global south are discussing more than human entanglements in the world's oceans and seas. And why this discussion is so important, because all of us know that we are in the ocean decade, which is 2021 to 2030. And crucial, critical discussions are taking place between policymakers, grassroots organizations, think tanks, academia, communities, that what science do we really need to make our oceans, to keep our oceans sustainable? So coming to this particular book by Sarpil Opperman, this book just got published last year, and this is called Blue Humanities. And Blue Humanities, it is, it's a framework, but it is, I think, also an agenda. Because a few years back, in 2011, in one of the working papers of RCC, Rational Concern Center, which specializes in environmental humanities, John Gillis, who is also an environmental historian, he talked about what he called, quote unquote, blue hole in environmental history. So through this, he asked the historians and social scientists to, focus on the blue, on blue ecologies. And definitely when one has to focus on blue ecology, one can understand that how this entire field has to be interdisciplinary, because it needs to integrate natural, technical, social sciences and humanities perspectives. But this book is phenomenal, just being published 2023, and the name is Blue Humanities. But the second part of the book is also called Storied Waterscape in the Anthropocene. So which I also feel to be very, very provocative, because here he talks about, how blue humanities is more than critical ocean studies, because it integrates oceanography with limnology. So which means integration of saltwater, marine environments with freshwater ecosystems. And that is why, the idea is that we have to imagine of oceanscapes or waterscape as, an integral whole of several components, which includes seawater, but also fresh waters and biomes, rivers, lakes, glaciers, wetlands, and everything. So there are, different types of discussions which are going on. There are critical studies which help us to understand what is known as terraqueous connectedness. So terra comes from terrestrial, and aqueous, it's the second part of aqueous. So why is it important for us to think from the terraqueous perspective? And this book, Unruly Waters, it's a fascinating book on Asia, but again, as I mentioned, more than Asia. And it talks about how rains, rivers, coasts, and seas, they have shaped each other across long-term space time scales. Now, what happens when we insert the urban? Because in this S2S approach, the panel, the session that we are having now, if I understand it correctly, it is about cities and S2S, or S2S and cities. So the whole idea is to kind of accommodate, to include cities within this critical discussion on waterscapes, on oceanscapes, but again, more than oceanscapes, all kinds of water, fresh water, salt water, and everything. Now, this scholarship is very, very recent. And I am intentionally trying to draw your attention to works from Asia, from the global south. And these are the two works from Eastern India, because, India, if you know the southern and eastern part of India, India is India has like mighty rivers and mighty delta systems. So, for example, if you consider the Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna system, it is the largest delta in the world, and several cities are located here. So, Eastern India has several delta and coastal cities. So these two books, like Blue Infrastructures and which came out in 2020, but this another book which is also on Kolkata, but focusing on the development and emergence of Kolkata as a delta city by Debjani Bhattacharya, which came out in 2018. These two books, it infuses the urban within the discussion of interconnected source to sea approach, right? And if you see this map, this is actually a map of the Ganga basin, and where you see that how here the city of Kolkata is located, and you see East Kolkata wetlands that play such an important role in the functioning sustenance and also the future of the city. And you see, one has to understand that how and why Kolkata should be located, positioned within this entire basin. So immediately when we start thinking from the cities and S2S approach, I think it immediately provokes us to understand that how cities have been reclaimed from the deltas, from the estuaries, from their larger ecological surroundings and systems. So the discussion has to be more than urban. It cannot be just constricted to urban, where for a long period of time there has been such a a Cartesian divide between cities and ecology. Then Anthropocene makes the whole discussion even more, how do I say, even more robust, because Anthropocene is not neutral. And I think this also has come out very well in the session note, where the idea is that we are in the Anthropocene, but Anthropocene is also the Urbanocene decade. So it is actually the era of the overlapping scenes where we see Anthropocene, Capitalocene, and Urbanocene cross-cutting each other. So, because for the first time, we are living in an urban world. The 2008 World Urbanization Prospects report show that how since 2007, the urban population of the planet is more than its rural population. So we are in this decade of these overlapping scenes. Now, again, I think cities, when we are thinking in terms of urban sustainability or urban resilience, it is very important to understand cities from the perspective of multiple disruptive risks. Because on one hand, we were impacted by COVID just very recently, and and all of us know that COVID is actually an urban disease. And I read a beautiful piece, a very strong piece by a political economist, Rob Wallace, and this piece came out in Monthly Review, where he showed that how why COVID so easily and so fast and so intensely, it became a pandemic, because these local spillovers, it could travel through global waves of trade, transportation, and this travel nodes. But the cities unfortunately were not equipped. We have seen how the cities across global south and global north were not really equipped to tackle the crisis. And moreover, on top of that, different cities were having other problems, because we are in the Anthropocene, we are in the period of overlapping scenes, where on one hand, during the time of COVID, for example, Kolkata was affected by Amphan, cyclone Amphan, super cyclone Amphan. And then on the other hand, for example, 2020 itself, August, there was this Bairat explosion, where this ammonium nitrate, it caused property damage of more than like 15 billion US dollars, and 300,000 people had to leave Lebanon. So how to tackle these multiple disruptive risks that are actually kind of impacting on cities all over the world. So, as I was making the earlier point very quickly, I think now what is happening in social sciences scholarship, interdisciplinary scholarship, is that there is more and more understanding and appreciation of this integration, cross fertilization of frameworks. And so, my final point that I'm trying to make is that know what is S2S, cities and S2S, then I think the crucial question is, how do we do S2S? So from I have to answer this question of how. I think to a great extent this how question addressed with the methodological perspective or approach that we are thinking of. And in this case, I particularly think, the roles played by very interdisciplinary and radical frameworks like environmental history, urban environmental history, and urban political ecology should be given a lot of weightage and importance, because political ecology and environmental history, it actually enable us to see or to understand cities as part of an interconnected wider ecological infrastructures idea. So you have to take into consideration the shifting historical scales. One has to look into deeper, probe down deeper into the power choreographies among the different actors, human, non-human, who shape urban ecology every day, but again within long-term temporal scales. And there are so many very like paradigms such as urban metabolism. I will not have the time to discuss everything so much, but I will be happy to take up questions on this. So the framework or the methodology that I'm suggesting is historical urban political ecology, where the researchers, they have the scope to integrate history with political ecology to map and understand the shifting mediations among actors, as the relationship between city and nature keeps on getting shaped. And so that's how cities and nature shape and reshape, and they also get shaped and reshaped by each other across space, time, and cultural scales. So, this book again, this actually tried to apply this view or historical urban political ecology framework to understand how cities should be seen as complex systems uh, that integrate, like technological apparatuses, complex histories of technological apparatuses, social arrangements, and more than human or non-human enactments. So when cities need to be understood or perceived, all these various snippets and the interactions and interactions among them need to be taken into consideration. And I was very much influenced by one architect. Her name is Stephanie Carlyle, and she wrote a very a rich blog piece in 2013, where she talked about what she calls living systems infrastructure. So why and how should cities be understood as living, as life? So living system infrastructure, because resilience and adaptive infrastructures cannot be built and imposed from above. One need to understand that they actually grow very slowly but extensively, integrating surrounding systems, flows, and entities. So this is my final slide, when I would like to talk about what do we do now. Once we are able to capture storylines, not stories, but storylines. So storylines means, repressed stories, suppressed stories, mainstream stories, convoluted stories, ignored stories, all kind of stories, but stories that exist, that together exist, making this cityscape, urbanscape, and waterscapes of city very, very prominent. So it's there, and it is important to actually recognize and appreciate these existing realities, right? So I am trying to think of this from what I call the web perspective. Web means weaved, embedded belonging. The city space, source to see, it is a space, inhabited by several actors, both human, non-human. It is a place shaped by very complex technologies. It is a space, where the performance of social arrangements, high end, low end, moderate end, performances need to be taken into consideration. So it is like a comprehensive narrative. It should be the comprehensive narrative of this storied Anthropocene. And one can immediately understand that, the urban that we're discussing now, it is definitely more than urban. So we need to plan urban, more than urban resilience, through what I am proposing here, more than urban blue humanities. Because when once we are able to capture these diverse storylines, it is also, how do we convey these storylines? And here comes the role of the role of arts, the role of artistic expressions, because it is very inclusive. So in one of our existing works right now is on what we call ethno-graphy, which is a combination of ethnographic and visualization techniques. So the role of arts in curating these storylines, and it can immediately create awareness among all. It can accommodate the expressions and the narratives, and the ideas, ideologies of everyone, including children, youth, elderly, so-called quote unquote non-academic, I would not say non-academic, but beyond academic stakeholders, so that finally we can think of blue stewardship. So thank you very much.
Give a round of applause for Dr. Dinia. Thank you so much. I was nervous when I first arrived to stage. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Jasmine Fournier. I'm the Executive Director of the Ocean Sewage Alliance. I'll be moderating the panel today, and I'd like to introduce our next group of panelists from Policy and Governance, Flora and Sabrina from Del Tardes and the Secretariat of the Wetlands. And while they're coming up, I'd like to recognize our colleagues from the Source to Sea platform who've helped us very much in our presentation and the framework around Source to Sea. All right, we'll give a round of applause for our new panelists. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today here. And I think this topic is really keen to my heart, and I think to many of yours, and I hope that we can then ignite a very powerful discussion after our presentations. So my topic will be on how we can enhance urban water resilience through multi-level governance, and you have a sneak peek or a spoiler alert of already what I'm going to be talking about. So as you know, cities are facing increasing water-related challenges and risk. But at the same time, we tend to frame the discussion around the threats. So what is the water scarcity, the lack of access to wash, floods and droughts that are increasing. But usually these challenges are not only challenges related to the threats to water risks, but also lack of ineffective water governance that is aggravating these challenges. So water challenges do not respect political boundaries. They are cross-geographic and interjurisdictional challenges, and we need to develop and work with integrative approaches in order to tackle this. So how can multi-level governance actually play a role in facilitating urban water resilience and a transition to urban water resilience? So as you know, cities, I will not go into statistics, but we are going into a very urban world, as Dr. Genia said. Cities are catalysts for change, and they are already demanding a call for action. They are closer to communities, They concentrate the population. They also concentrate economic activities and infrastructure. They are strongly connected to local stakeholders and communities, but they sometimes lack this connection to their national or to global initiatives. So there is also a call there for integrating local, national, and global efforts into accelerating urban water resilience. Multi-level governance basically looks at an approach to integrate vertically and also horizontal different levels of governance and decision-making. And we can do this in many different ways. There are many different schools. I will not go into the theory, let's say, of this. But basically, we can have a top-down approach where we look at a very, let's say, national, strong political decision-making process and guidance into action, but we can also have a very bottom-up approach and a governance approach to multi-level governance. So there are strengths in this state-centric and governance-centric approach, and I consider that, let's say, the strength is in the combination of both. So we do need a whole-of-government approach. We do need an effort that combines all the national stakeholders in different sectors with a multidisciplinary approach, but we also need a whole-of-society approach. And this means including society, having an inclusive approach, academic community, local actors, and so on. So I want to go to focus quickly into, let's say, coordination mechanisms that can facilitate these efforts. And some already came from the keynotes that we had before. And I think perhaps the most important one is this bridging concepts idea. So why is it so important to bridge concepts? Because it means that we are all understanding the problem in the same way. We need to have a common framing and a common understanding of what is resilience, what is a water challenge, what are the needs. And stories can really help in building that narrative, that common narrative and understanding among stakeholders. But we also need policy entrepreneurship, and this is a role more for the policymakers across levels. We need champions in the local level, we need champions in the regional level, in the basin scale level, and also on the national level to push these initiatives forward. Funding and finance are also key, and I think many of you know through your work experience, without funds, initiatives cannot go further. So there's also a need to integrate in this multi-level governance approach funding institutions that are non-governmental stakeholders sometimes, so IFIs, donors, foundations. The list keeps on growing on time, but they all have a role to play. Governmental hierarchy is also important in the sense of this whole-of-government approach. It is important to have clear rules and clear mandates for all institutions. If we have overlapping roles, overlapping mandates, then we have a vacuum of power, or we are not competing authorities, we waste resources competing with each other, or no one knows who is in charge. Both are very dangerous outcomes. And finally, coordinating bodies. So coordinating bodies can help, in a way, facilitate this platform or this committee, this place to discuss and share ideas, where stakeholders can come together from different government levels and work towards a common goal. I would like to quickly show with you two examples of how we can see this multi-level governance in practice. And the first one is the Water as Leverage program. My colleague Robert will then go into further detail into this. But I wanted to shine a little bit of light into the Water as Leverage guidance. So for those who don't know about it, Water as Leverage was launched in 2017 as a program to use water as an instrument to accelerate innovation with a multidisciplinary approach in cities. It is a local-driven effort, so a very bottom-up inclusive process for working with water and not against it. The Water as Leverage guidance is now currently under development and hopefully soon will be published. And it's basically a recollection of all the lessons learned from our Water as Leverage experience over the last years. Things have gone right in some places, things have gone not so good in others, and we've learned from it. And from that, we have developed this guidance, which are condensed in 8 principles and 6 phases, which clearly state how, let's say, an inclusive and effective whole-of-society, whole-of-government approach for water, urban water resilience process can take place. So the principle that I would like to focus on is on principle 8, which is from connecting local to global. I think that is key, and it really summarizes the need to understand that efforts need to be, from the start, connected from the communities to the local level. So this means, for example, that local actions need to be harnessed and anchored in national adaptation plans, in national determined contributions, and these also need to be anchored into international water agendas. So this alignment vertically into objectives can also make us act in a more effective way and in a quicker way and create more impact. So yeah, water as leverage has been growing in the last years into a global program, and it's also developed itself into, let's say, a multi-level climate action program. So it's also seeking to enforce or to strengthen these connections with national strategies, with national stakeholders, and with the international community. So it started as initiatives on the local level, and now it's growing into a learning platform where also there can be exchange across peers, across cities. There is an academy. There's also a global initiative, and many things coming on together from these past experiences. The second example that I would like to share with you is a joint collaboration between the Deltares and the World Bank. It's the EPIC response framework, and for me it's very interesting because it's one of the only approaches that I've seen that addresses solely the institutional system. So the EPIC response framework is a compendium of policy programs, one of the biggest, to understand the combined risk management of floods and droughts. It's a cascading effect, and in this mnemonic device, you can see what the different letters from EPIC, which is actually an acronym, stands for. So in EPIC, we go from the enabling, so that's enabling environment, the macro, the national frameworks that set out how water resources managements are governed. Then we go into planning. So there we go into the source to sea approach in a way, because we look at the origin and at the end. So we go from the upstream, so the cities. We also look at agricultural, irrigation, down into the coastal planning, all with an integrative manner. And I'm trying to understand the coordination mechanisms between the different agencies that are involved. Only if we have an integrative planning across all the different levels, geographically, but also politically and administrative, then we can go into thinking of investment planning. And only after that, we can think about monitoring, controlling that infrastructure. And only after that, we can have an effective response to flood and drought risk management. So basically, EPIC summarizes this whole of government effort that I previously mentioned with you by focusing on the main agencies that are in charge of the hydroclimatic risk management, that being water resources management, disaster risk reduction, drought risk management, agriculture, hydromet, agriculture, irrigation. And we take this into the lens of a source-to-sea approach, on the whole of government approach, multi-sectoral and also multi-scalar. And finally, this whole of society aspect, and it's also mentioned by our keynote speaker before. Whole of society is key to building this bottom-up governance-led approach for multi-level governance. We need the involvement of local stakeholders, of local government. We also need active public participation. We also need social inclusion. The most vulnerable groups, the marginalized communities, women and girls need to be part of the discussion from the beginning. They are usually the ones that suffer the consequences, and their voices are rarely heard. Education and risk awareness is also key, especially in the response and control aspects of water resources management. And the scientific community also has a big role to play, sharing knowledge, pushing also the knowledge frontier further, and sharing that knowledge with the community, but also with the policymakers. There is a need also for science to inform policy, and policies to be able to be informed by science. And finally, open information. I think that is something that I also heard in many sessions before. Access to data, access to plans, information is key, and transparency is also key for facilitating this discussion. So to close my presentation, I would like to leave you with some, let's say, lessons learned and how we could move forward into enhancing urban water resilience. So we've seen that also resilience is a process. It's not something that you do once and then it's done. It's an ongoing process, and there are no one-off solutions that solve everything, because problems are weaker and cities are complex. Also, early engagement is key, and in this, the role of policy entrepreneurs is also fundamental to aligning intentions, objectives, strategies, and accelerate action. As I said, policy entrepreneurship matters across all levels, and I might dare to say that if we don't have strong champions across all levels of governance, then it's unlikely that we'll have a successful outcome. Also, cross-scale knowledge sharing is fundamental, not only between the different levels of governance, but across multiple sectors. So between agriculture, hydromet, water resources management, risk, we all have something to learn from each other. And also between peers. So there's a great value and opportunity in letting cities, basins, national governments learn from each other. So we perhaps have a role there to facilitate those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be in this panel, and thank you, Yasmine, for your leadership. I'm Flore Lafaye de Michaud from the Secretariat of the Convention on Wetlands. I'm Senior Advisor in charge of the Europe region, and I also lead the Global Water Program in the Secretariat. And I would like also to thank Dr. Gina Mukherjee for her thought-provocative talk that called us to really consider blurring frontiers between urban and non-urban, between living bodies and infrastructure, and also between technologies and art. And I will come back to this in my conclusion. So I would like here to make a case for bringing the cities into source-to-sea approaches to address, in fact, more than cities' challenges, using wetlands as a thread. So wetlands, these geographical spaces that can be catalysts for action towards water resilience in cities and beyond. And as you know, in the definition of the Convention on Wetlands, wetlands are either inland, like rivers, marshes, lakes, mires, peatlands, ponds, floodplains, but also coastal ones, such as lagoons, tidal flats, mangroves, coral reefs, and also human-made ones, such as reservoirs or rice paddies. And wetlands are there for all sources of water, but also they are the immediate receptacle of all waters. And in that sense, they provide multiple ecosystem services to cities, such as providing water for drinking purpose. And this is the case here in Stockholm, which most of the potable water comes from Lake Mälaren, that receive its water from other major 12 tributaries, themselves connected to springs and peatlands. And we also heard from Gina the example of the East Kolkata wetlands that are a Ramsar site or a wetland of international importance that contributes to clean urban wastewaters, and that is also a source of livelihood. So wetlands have also the power to cool air temperature or regulate flood, but at the condition that they are functional. Healthy ecosystems can also provide recreation and aesthetic values that increase the attractiveness and the quality of life. But, of course, when they are degraded reversely, they can also amplify the vulnerability of fragile communities. And this is even more the case in changing climate. I would like just to invite to showcase a video that is illustrative of these ecosystem services provided by wetlands in cities. Thank you so much. So that video was shown at the Convention on Wetlands COP14 in Geneva last November 2022 to introduce the ceremony of a wetlands city accreditation. So at that time, 25 cities were awarded wetland cities, and now there are 43 accredited cities in the world. And as you know, the convention dates back to 1971. We count 172 contracting parties, and it is said as the oldest and most experienced MEAs, and here I quote our Secretary General, Dr. Mumba. But the Wetland City Accreditation is, in fact, a recent scheme that was adopted by the parties in 2015, and it's a voluntary scheme that provides international recognition for cities to value and conserve their natural or human-made wetlands. It is meant to trigger increased efforts from these municipalities in conservation, management, and restoration of wetlands, as well as in public awareness and education. So this scheme has the power to call attention from all international organizations, national governments, and local authorities to nature-based solutions for water and climate resilience, and also to leverage citizens' mobilization in favor of such solutions. And in the testimonies from the mayors and the representatives of these cities in 2022 that we heard, there were multiple stories of many outcomes of such wetland action for school children, citizens, tourists, companies, but also cranes, migratory birds, amphibians, rare plant species, and beyond. We are grateful to Eclair Africa, which organized a webinar in June 2023 to introduce the scheme to wider audiences. Because our proposition is today to build on this scheme and to invite partners to help us in this regard, to encourage cities to do more for the upstream and downstream wetlands on which they rely. And here, remember of the example of Stockholm. So we would like to emphasize that cities, it's a fair game for them, it's a fair play to join because they depend on the whole functional and balanced water-to-sea system. And it's also important to get cities on board because cities have often developed skills, knowledge, and expertise in designing complex solutions, whether flood regulating system or for crafting innovative payment for ecosystem services. And I've encountered that case in Strasbourg city in France. And cities are also very interesting because they can leverage funds more than other public actors. In the case that they are often credible interlocutors for multilateral development banks. They encompass powerful actors, such as industries or businesses that have means to pay for the services they get. And they have also the possibility to have a say in water prices and water tariff structure as municipalities sign the contract with the water service providers. They can also internalize pressures on water bodies like pollution through taxes. So all these means make the cities really important interlocutors and partners that we have to bring on board in source-to-sea systems. So here I'd like to move to my conclusion. We've seen that healthy and functional wetlands are key to achieve cities' water and climate resilience. And reversely, the cities should be invited to play bigger roles in source-to-sea systems. I'd like to recall that wetlands provide tangible services, but also intangible ones, such as sense of place, cultural identity, and expression of art. And I come back to what Genia showed us about the possibilities that are opened by linking all these threads with a source-to-sea perspective. And I guess that cities should be good teachers in this regard. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you both so much. And I'd like to introduce our next panel on policy and action. We have two presenters that will be here on stage today. Anton and Robert, please come up. And then we'll have one last presenter who will be joining us online. So without further ado, let's welcome our next round of speakers.
very good morning to all of you. My name is Robert Proos. I work for the government of the Netherlands, specifically the Netherlands Enterprise and Development Agency. We are responsible for translating our public policy into programs and projects all over the world. I'm specifically responsible for several of our programs and projects in Colombia, and I'm very pleased to be able to share one of the case studies to put a focus on the importance of cities and working in cities in the source to sea approach. From this beautiful city of Stockholm, I want to take you this morning to the vibrant and tropical city of Cartagena in Colombia. This is the Cartagena waterfront. Cartagena is surrounded by water, but also closely connected to important ecosystems that are just at the border of the city. So I think it's a really nice example, and also very much connecting to the stories that we heard earlier today. I want to tell you something about the Waterways Leverage program. Waterways Leverage Cartagena is a program, like Sabrina introduced, focused on developing solutions, infrastructural solutions, but also strategies for cities, with cities, to increase resilience and also to focus on the implementation of sustainable and integral projects. This is part of an approach that we have developed for cities in Asia and together with cities in Asia, learned a lot, and now we are scaling up this method to work with cities on the development of solutions that can, for example, be financed locally, but also connected to MDBs, IFI finance, and private sector finance. Cartagena is located at the northern part of Colombia, which is next to the Caribbean Sea. We have initiatives in Asia, also the northern part of Europe, recently started one in Kenya, and also aiming to scale up in Mexico. But today we're going to Cartagena. And if you Google Cartagena, this is what you will find. This is the beautiful city, inner city, historical city center. Easy to find on Google Images. This is also something that you might be able to find, same historical city center, but also focused on the type of water challenges cities face. But I think closely connected to today's topic is something that's way more difficult to find on Google, but it's also Cartagena. This is next the wetland that's part of the city, the Ciénaga de la Virgen, which is an important wetland, historically very important, also in terms of ecosystem services, in terms of economy. But it's also an important challenge for the city. So this is really how challenges and opportunities are really something that come together in the city. And a little bit about Waterways Leverage Cartagena, because as you can see, or maybe not, but I'm not Colombian, I'm not from Cartagena, but we are working with many cities and governments worldwide as part of the bilateral collaboration, in this case with the government of Colombia and the municipality of Cartagena. And it's also initiated with them, because there is a great need for more and better informed projects. And if some of you have been to climate COPs or other major international events, there's often a lot of money pledged for financing the implementation of projects, but it's basically very difficult to find the right type of projects, to find finance for the process itself that is necessary to develop projects in an inclusive and integrated manner. So that is what the government of the Netherlands, together with local partners, is doing as part of the Waterways Leverage program, focused on the initiation phase, the early phases, developing the solutions together with local stakeholders, together with communities, informing the type of solutions that are necessary to reach climate resilience and also to develop the innovative projects that today's city landscape need, because we cannot copy-paste from the past. We really need to work in a more integrated and especially in a more inclusive manner. As said, we learned a lot in Asia. I think it's important to mention that in the 3 cities we started working, Kulna, Chennai and Semarang, a lot went well and a lot was learned. And I think it's important to state that within the Waterways Leverage program, we try and aim to put locals in the lead, really co-creating solutions together with local communities, stakeholders, universities, really have a broad spectrum of local stakeholders that are like gearing the direction of the type of solutions a city needs. And focusing on finance, because like I said, there's a lot of finance and funding available for implementation of projects. But if you do not incorporate the financial sector in its broader sense from the very beginning, you will end up with a great project. If you come to their desk saying like, hey, we developed this in an inclusive, great manner, they will say, that's beautiful, beautiful project. It's such a pity that you did not take into account all the requirements we have. So that's why it's important, and also at the heart of our project and program, to work with the financial sector. And again, connecting local and global. As said before in the intervention, I think it's important to highlight that the Water as Leverage program really builds on international lessons learned, because I think internationally there are many examples that can really also thrive the type of solutions a city like Cartagena needs, but making sure that the solutions itself are being developed from the Cartagena perspective in this case, because I don't think you will find a better expert in the type of solutions a city needs than the Cartageneros in this case, than the people that live in Cartagena, because they experience the challenges on a daily basis, but they also know how those challenges can be connected to opportunities. Then back to the city of Cartagena, and specifically the case study that I want to present. Here you see the type of challenges and vulnerabilities the city faces, but also the interesting perspective, and also from a source to sea perspective, a city landscape at the coastal edge can play. At the top side of the picture you see the Ciénaga that I will be talking about, but there's also a big bay area, a lot of water bodies surrounding the city, and the city of course has a direct impact on these water bodies. And just want to highlight the focus area of today's intervention, which is the Ciénaga de la Virgen, an important wetland area. Like I said, it's the lung of the city. It's really the blue lung that provides a lot of ecosystem services, economic opportunities, for example, artisanal fishery, etc., to the city, but it's also very much under threat. Typical problems that you see with many wetlands that are so close to city concentrate themselves around the water edge. And I think that's also how the source to sea focus comes in, because that's also where the barrier of opportunity in terms of economic, fishery, etc. opportunities, sometimes even touristic opportunities arise. But it's also where, the pollution from the city enters the system, which is important to mention, I think, because this is, of course, the entry point from the wetland to the sea. And it's important to see that social inequality, so also the social component, is very much at the heart of water issues, because inequality in a city like Cartagena, but many other cities as well, is really shaped by water. Here you see that especially the poor communities, indigenous communities, are at the areas that are at the highest risk in terms of water challenges. So why did we, together with the city, develop the Water as Leverage program that is really focused on developing the solutions from the very beginning with the communities, with the stakeholders, not by designing solutions in Amsterdam, Stockholm or New York, but really meeting, working together with communities. What type of solutions do you need? And I want to highlight one example as part of my intervention. This is one of the canals that ends ultimately in the wetland area that I just showed. It's not embracing water as an opportunity or as something that can really thrive the city. It's really just there. But how to change the perspective from challenges into opportunities into canals. We're currently moving to the pre-feasibility phase. I'm showing results of the conceptual design phase. How can you look at a canal as a system, as an integrated system of your city? Well, this is an example of how you can embrace the multiple values of water. And I think it was also highlighted in one of the previous interventions. I think it's important to look, how can you leverage investments in water infrastructure, and really make sure that you create benefits that move beyond water alone. So this is just an example. Water can create spaces for entrepreneurs. Water can, of course, increase biodiversity, ecosystem services. But ultimately, by also taking the social lens, it really helps to create a sense of ownership, create a sense of belonging of the water bodies. And that's why I think it's very important to also have that social lens to interventions in the city landscape, to the source to sea approach. And this is just one example that together with the stakeholders in Cartagena, we are moving to pre-feasibility and feasibility phase, hopefully preparing for implementation together with local stakeholders. Just a few key points that I want to highlight. like I said, water management, especially in cities, is not just a technical challenge. Also in the Netherlands, we tend to look at water as a technical challenge that needs a technical solution, but it has a very big social component. You need to look at those challenges from a way broader lens. Like I said, it's interconnected with other issues, especially in those urban contexts. And it's easy to talk about all the challenges related to water, but it can also be a great opportunity if it's approached in an integral and inclusive way, which is what we try to do as part of the Water as Leverage program. And I want to thank you for your attention and looking forward to the next steps of our discussion.
Great, thank you very much, Robert. And I'm very pleased that you framed the issue of urbanization in quite a positive way, as part of the solution. Because as Professor Mukherjee also pointed out at the beginning, of course, from the year 2007, humanity is a predominantly urban residing species. So where I work at ICLEI, Governments for Local Governments for Sustainability, we very much want to try and partner with local governments and view them as the frontline responders to the impacts of climate change. So although national policy is where your commitments and your NDCs and all those sort of things are made in the climate change space, the adaptation and the response to the changes happens primarily at local government level. And this is important. I mean, given the fact that, of course, as urbanization takes place, we tend to replace natural infiltration zones like wetlands, like paleo channels, like floodplains. We replace them with the trappings of modern-day urbanization, shopping malls, hotels, conference centers, things we all enjoy, right? So it's natural. So we cover those areas, and the net impact, of course, is that you have less infiltration into the groundwater, you have more flooding within the urban areas, and we are familiar with all those challenges. You overlay that then, of course, with the changes to the hydrological cycle that we are seeing globally due to climate change. I mean, essentially, it adds up to a speeding up of this hydrological cycle. So typically, rainy seasons are shorter than they previously were. Rainfall events are more intense. Dry periods are more intense, so you're seeing drier periods followed by more flooding. And these are some of the challenges that I know our roughly 2,600 members globally are facing on a daily basis. It's also interesting when you look at the hydrological cycle that when a drop of water falls on the land, it takes anywhere between 2 to 6 months for that drop of water to make its way back to the ocean. 2 to 6 months. So that's also quite a range, that, because of course it depends on how rapidly it flows off from the land. Does it infiltrate? Does it not? But about 2 to 6 months it spends on land. It spends roughly 3,200 years in the ocean as part of the hydrological cycle. So it means we've got a really, really short window of opportunity to work with that drop of ocean. And what we do with that drop of water, of course, then has a huge impact on our oceans, so water pollutions and so forth. So we really need to find ways of keeping that water on land for as long as possible, keeping it clean for as long as possible, and ideally letting it recharge the aquifers where it can play a meaningful role. This was brought home to me most starkly with a program we're busy developing in the Asia-Pacific region on the island, the country of Kiribati. Christmas Island, it is called. Now, Christmas Island lands up being the island that is the most east of us. If you keep on heading in an easterly direction, you go way past Australia, and just before you reach the international date line, you hit Kiribati. And Christmas Island is the most east of the Kiribati Islands. And it's interesting, the entire island, the highest point on this island is 3 meters high. So the palm trees are in fact the highest feature, but the highest geographical feature is 3 meters high. And they rely on 4 natural aquifers called lenses, where essentially the fresh water floats in a very delicate equilibrium above the saline water underneath it. And they can draw down on these lenses sustainably and use that water. And that's the entire water supply of this island. But the government of Kiribati has identified Christmas Island as being a growth center where they are actively encouraging people to move out to and start developing all of that. And yet the local authority over there needs to manage that in the face of increasing rainfall variability. They speak of having a rainfall variability annually there of between 200 millimeters and 1,200 millimeters. So you can imagine, how do you plan for that? 1 meter difference in your annual rainfall. So these are the kind of challenges that they are facing. And then, of course, the salinization of those lenses that they have for fresh water. Now, we've heard of a few different approaches, things that can be done, investing in natural infrastructure, but two things that we would push for strongly. We're talking about policy, what can be done here now. First is that urban areas should be better connected to the catchments which serve them and into which their effluent flow. So investing upstream, making sure that those wetlands, like what Flo was talking about earlier, are really functional and can serve their water storage, water retention functions that they actually fulfill over there, reducing urban flooding, but also providing water in those dry periods with this increased rainfall variability. And then likewise, making sure that the wetland areas within cities and downstream from them are protected. And that is why ICLE has become an active member of the Ramsar initiative around getting cities to declare wetland areas as protected zones that they work with. And I think more of that needs to be done. So that connecting cities to their catchments is important. The second thing that we are really pushing for at local government level, and especially at municipal level specifically, is to really recognize natural infrastructure, whether it's wetlands or other types of infiltration zones, paleo channels that have been rehabilitated and so forth, but to recognize natural infrastructure as part of the asset base within a municipality. So every year, most municipalities have to update their asset register of all of the infrastructure that they have in the city. So it'll be roads, it'll be public works, dams, pipelines, all of that forms part of that asset base. And yet, very, very few of them include natural infrastructure in that asset register. And of course, what you don't count, you cannot manage. So that's one very simple step that can be taken, is to identify those natural assets and place a value on them. Because once you do that, you start allocating an annual budget for the operation and maintenance of those assets, and natural infrastructure included. And that's the very first step to make sure that you are actually investing in those natural assets so that they can continue playing those roles. So those are maybe the 2 points that we'll really be pushing for and working with our members at local government level to try and implement. Thank you very much.
And then now we're going to. And then now we'll be joining our colleague, Dr. Suh, who will be joining us on Zoom. And I'll try to stay on the stage.
Hello?
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. We can see and hear you.
Okay, I will try to share my screen. So can you see this?
Yes, Dr.
Can
Suh,
you see this screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to start my presentation here. So I'm allowed only 7 to 10 minutes, so I'll be very brief. So here's you can see the logo here, Wetland City Network. This is the network of wetland cities accredited by the Ramsar Convention, and we are supporting the network as the secretariat for this network. Okay, I'll start the presentation with the photo, 2 photos. You can see the photo up here. So those are the wetland city mayors, first 18 wetland cities accredited at the Ramsar COP13. So in the photo below, can you see the air? I mean, hot air in the conference hall. So lots of media came here to interview the mayors and then the national government authorities, local governments. They all get together to see this memorable event. And also all the city mayors, they put this unforgettable moment in their mind, and then they insert this momentum to their and then the second batch, at the Ramsar Cup 14, 25 wetland cities added to the list. So in total, 43 wetland cities are accredited by the Ramsar Convention. And then if you see here the map, so 43 wetland cities are dotted all over the world, and it started from 18 and then added 25, so total 43 wetland cities. But here we received 32 more wetland cities applied to the accreditation. So possibly the total number can be the 75 wetland cities after the Ramsar Cup 15 next year. So Ramsar wetland city accreditation is not just popped up in the Ramsar Convention. There were a series of discussions during the COPs. At the Ramsar COP 10 in 2008, the importance of wetlands in urban and peri-urban wetlands that was highlighted, and also involvement of municipalities was spotlighted as an important element. And also at the Ramsar COP 11, another resolution requested to explore establishing opportunity, wetland city accreditation, the positive branding opportunities for the cities. And in the end, at the Ramsar COP 12, wetland city accreditation was adopted as a resolution to the Ramsar Convention. It's a benefit for the local populations. I brought three case studies, out of 43 wetland cities, in line with the topic of the session, cities to see. So I selected three cities located in the coastal area. The first one is Dongyin City in China. Is well maintained in the Dongyin City. As we know, we cannot really stop the urbanization. So it means that we have to recognize this water and wetland as an important, significant element in the urban planning. So you can see in your left in the photo, the wetlands has to be remained as a buffer for the climate change adaptation, and also water, and then also the source of and educational activities. And also on your the photo on your right side, this is the water coming from the Yellow River into the sea. The Dongyin City is located in the estuary river mouth of Yellow River. So the water channels and the river system in surrounding in the Dongyin City is under the conservation policy, and then is maintained as an important element in the city. And also restoration is another key element in the Dongyin City. The city restored 4,833 hectares of farmland into wetland. It's a big creation. And then also they're doing a lot of work for the invasive species control. And the second case study is Niigata City in Japan. So in Niigata City, the management committee is well established. So it means that the participatory management is implemented in Niigata. Important part of management. The city has to convince local communities and all the wetland stakeholders. Then they can be part of this management. So if this management committee is well established and maintained a communication channel, in the Niigata city. And also the city has a very good conservation plan. So systematic management is under this conservation plan. So all 16 wetlands, including the one Ramsar site, is under this plan and then is maintained, managed. And the restoration approach are different from other cities. City and local communities are together to push this forward, a restoration. And also they have a very unique research network conference to convene all wetland stakeholders in one place and a report to the people what's a new research result. So it's communication is very important in the Niigata case, and then the management, the participatory management was important. And the case study from the Suncheon, Korea, which city, the Ramsar Regional Center, East Asia, is located. So as you see on your left hand, the wetland is well used as a ecotourism site, but the land was before planned to be developed as a aggregate collection site. But the local NGOs and then citizens stopped the city's government, local government decision, and they returned to be remained as a natural wetland. So the conservation policy was that moment, and that they made a management committee. The local government invited local communities and NGOs and experts together in the meeting room. So they review all the management, the issues and topics about the wetland conservation. They review that. And they put this wetland into their urban planning process. So if you see the people lined up in the photo, so at that moment, 2 to 3 million people visited this small wetland site. So it means that it was a big pressure to wetland. So the city decided to make another source of attraction, tourist attraction near about 10 kilometers away from the wetland site. So they built the artificial national garden about 10 kilometers away from the wetland. So they attract, both of them attract the tourists. So now 10 million people visit the small city, Suncheon, every year. Means that the population of the city is about 280,000. So more than 30 times of people visit this city, and then it becomes a source of economy benefit for the citizens. And it means that abandoned land became the pride of the citizens of Suncheon City. And here, so you see, wetland city accreditation is not just the cities. So local government and local NGOs, national government, international NGOs, research institutes, international organizations, all work together to achieve balanced urban development with the nature. So wetland city accreditation, the wetland city network is formed at the Ramsar COP13 in the, as I mentioned, in the conference, the hot air conference room. So we asked the question to the wetland city mayors. 18 city mayors, when they feel very happy with the certificate, and then I asked the question, will you continue to do this with the wetland cities together as a network? Then they said, all of them said yes. So we start to organize the conference for the wetland city network. So we share the philosophy, vision, of cities, and then all the cities and group advisory and scientific support. And the most important thing is this mayor's, the Wetland City Network meeting is a decision makers meeting. So we call this annual mayor's roundtable. So decision makers get together, they share the ideas, then they bring it and then they just put it into place. They just implement it right away. So they are the decision makers. This is the power of Wetland City Network. So we are continuing this every year. This year, we are going to do this Wetland City Network meeting in Donging City. And then next year, we will have it in the Hungary, Tata City. So wetland cities are waiting for this opportunity of having this meeting and then sharing their ideas and opportunities. I mean, if we can bring these cities to see to the cities, this is going to be a great opportunity for them to contribute to the environment conservation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suh. And we'll end with our last panelist, Lindsay, who will talk to us about localized innovative solutions. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. There we go. Great. What's your name? Cool. I'm Lindsay Stradley. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Synergy Collaborative and Fresh Life, which is our sanitation services organization. We work, I'm based in Kenya. We work across a number of cities. I think of most relevance here, they include Kenya, where they include Nairobi, where a lot of the low-income areas where we work are located along river riparian areas as well as in very flood-prone areas. We also work in Kisumu, which is located on the shores of Lake Victoria, and we also have a recent partnership with Mombasa, which is a historic coastal city on the Indian Ocean. So I wanted to pick up a little bit from where both Robert and Anton had left off. I think one of the things Robert mentioned in speaking about Cartagena was how important it is to make sure that solutions are coming from communities. I think you said that you won't find a better expert than the people who live in these cities, and so very much take an innovative approach that I'll speak about, but really the starting place is working with and through the communities where, that are the source, in this case, of sanitation of sewage waste. What are the opportunities and challenges that they're facing, and then connecting that as well to, as Anton is speaking about, local governments is critical if we're going to have innovation, community level innovation at scale. You have to bring in municipal governments, and so in all of the cities where we work, we're partnered with the municipal government and the utility, the water and sanitation utility in that city. So just that context. So we work particularly in non-sewered areas, which mostly means urban informal settlements. And as you saw on the map from the areas of Cartagena that Robert highlighted, these are areas that typically, informal settlements typically don't have sewer services. And too often, I think when cities say, well, there's either sewers or nothing, and so until we have budgets and plans that can facilitate sewers, what are we to do? Not much to be done. And as Fresh Life, we work with cities to say, great news, there are great ways to manage sanitation waste and moreover provide high quality sanitation services to your residents that don't require the level of infrastructure investment needed to lay pipes to build large sewer networks. And in some cities, these might be a kind of interim or transitional solution as part of a longer-term master plan, and in other cities or parts of those cities, they may be a great fit in the long term, particularly in flood-prone areas or other areas where sewers may not be feasible. These are images that you see here from Nairobi, and as I mentioned, a lot of Nairobi's informal settlements are along riverways, so that top left photo is actually a river that most of the time is relatively dry, other than sewage and another pollution. We recently in Kenya experienced significant flooding, including in Nairobi, and this location looked very different at that time, where the rivers and everything that is typically in them kind of took over the rest of the riparian areas there along the informal settlements. But day to day, these areas not only do they not have sewer network, but across all of Nairobi, so the informal and formal areas, about 60% of the waste of the city is unsafely managed, and ultimately that water is being either dumped or ultimately emptied into water bodies. So what can we do? We operate non-sewered sanitation service networks, primarily container-based sanitation, which is an opportunity to provide high-quality sanitation without water. We capture the waste and into sealed cartridges, which are then removed from the communities that we serve. A key part of this is not just that infrastructure, which is low cost, but high quality from a user experience. But even more important is that they're actively managed. This means that they're regularly emptied. So this is every 1 to 2 days, basically depending on the usage, the number of people using a given facility. These are located within residential areas, so shared by one or more households within a given kind of residential plot, and they're emptied regularly. That active management not only means that they're clean for the users, but that there prevents any opportunity for the waste to enter directly into the environment. It's also really important from a greenhouse gas and a climate perspective in this way too, because they don't have the opportunity to begin to emit methane if you actively manage them, as we do. Another aspect of non-sewered sanitation services that we provide, and again in partnership with the local municipal governments and utilities, is working with manual emptiers of pit latrines. We call this Mta Fresh, which means fresh community. And this is really looking at the idea of even as we build up larger networks of high-quality non-sewered sanitation, the existing local solution to date has largely been pit latrines. And in informal settlements, these are typically areas with high water tables. You're going to find the waste in those pits are going directly into that water table or overflowing into the community when it rains. And moreover, when they are empty, they're typically dumped in those same rivers that we were looking at earlier. So we've worked with the local community-based organizations that do this emptying to not only make sure that they're emptied more frequently and more safely, but that waste is then brought to our transfer stations where we ensure that it is safely managed, that it is safely treated. A key aspect of the work that we do is making sure that not only is all of the waste safely treated, but much of that then is actually upcycled in taking a circular economy or sort of zero waste approach. So from the organic waste in our sanitation network and other organic waste that were entering the environment and water bodies in the communities we serve, we produce three products, and there are others as well, but 3 main ones to date. That's an organic fertilizer, an insect-based protein for animal feed, and biomass fuel briquettes. And so these are just examples. This isn't to say that the way that we provide sanitation or the way that we treat and reuse the waste are the best, or certainly by any means the only ways, but is an example of innovation that we produce at scale right now, serving more than 250,000 people daily in partnership with the local governments where we work, and that these are opportunities to provide safely managed sanitation and waste treatment that don't require the level of infrastructure investment that we typically associate with sewered sanitation, and thereby give cities opportunities or options to manage the waste coming from those cities before they would make it into the seas. And so with that, I think, Jasmine, will pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And I'd like to invite our panel back up on stage. We're going to jump straight to questions from the audience because we only have 10 minutes left. And while they're coming up on stage, I'd just like to acknowledge that one of our colleagues was unable to make it to the presentation today because of visa issues. So I'd like to say that it's wonderful that we have such a wonderful panel of experts here, but we have to acknowledge the voices that aren't heard because of these international visa issues. So that being said, are there any questions from the audience? I've got one over here. Over here? Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you. I just walk up to the mic.
Thank you for your presentation, Linda, I believe? Lindsay?
Lindsay.
Lindsay, yes. I wondered what happens to the waste that's taken out of those containers?
Shall I answer now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So actually, I can just go back briefly. So we, this is a picture of our waste treatment facility. And so it is treated, combined with other organic waste. So think post-consumer food waste, municipal market waste, ag waste, and upcycled into organic fertilizer and an insect-based protein for animal feed and biomass fuel briquettes.
So just so I understand, so you have a long, very detailed chain from all those individuals emptying the containers to a collection facility to on and on and on until it reaches this treatment.
Yes,
facility.
that is correct.
That's a long chain.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, and so it's very much based in the community. So the work we do with our network of toilets is intentionally creates a lot of green jobs. And so it's, most of our colleagues are from the communities that we serve. So again, not only is the idea something that was co-created with them over the past decade, but is really implemented through the communities that are directly receiving that service. And I think is a key part of making a sanitation and waste management approach sustainable is embedding it in local economies.
Wonderful. I saw another question over here.
Yes, here. Yeah. Thank you. Martin Gambrel, World Bank consultant. Hi. Thank you very much for the presentations. And I really appreciate the focus on governance and participation, but I think we also need to understand the elements of pollution that are emanating from cities. And we obviously, around the world, we have a combination of wastewater and stormwater. Here in Stockholm, that happens. It happens all around the world. And it happens formally in places like Stockholm, but informally in many parts of the world. So one issue is stormwater and wastewater. Another is what is wastewater made up of? And wastewater is made up of black water from toilets and grey water from the rest of our water use within households. And we need to understand the different elements of those. The polluting the nitrogen and phosphorus is in the black water, it's not in the grey water, and that is what is causing the problems in our receiving water bodies. And within the black water, we have urine. And urine is where the vast majority of our nitrogen is. So we need to understand these technically to understand what sort of treatment processes we're putting in place. And different places around the world, such as Sanergy is doing in Kenya, that I know well, Lindsay's experience. Other places are looking at this. Paris is currently installing urine diverting toilets because the Seine can't take any more nitrogen. Helsingborg in the south of Sweden has a separate black water, grey water system because the sea can't take any more nutrients. So we need to understand technically what our problem is as well, and we need evidence for that, and we need advocacy, because utilities and service providers often don't want to do things differently. So I make a plea for us to think about the different elements of pollution and the responses to those different elements of pollution. Thank you.
Wonderful. We've got about 5 more minutes. Are there any other questions from audience members? I don't see any right now, so I've got a question for you all. I'm curious what opportunities you see with cities using the Source to Sea framework, and anybody who wants to answer, feel free.
I can jump in.
Go ahead.
I think I also try to make it clear as part of my presentation. I think it's also bringing in an opportunity to look from the opportunity lens. I think that's important because, like I said in my intervention, we tend to also during conferences like this focus very much on the challenges, and although the challenges are there, I think, and also from my work in cities like Cartagena, I think advocating for the positive lens and the opportunity lens, also through this framework, can really help activate citizens, governments in a positive way, and also generate a lasting impact, because the sustainability of infrastructure also depends to a large extent on the ownership that is being felt related to the infrastructure. So that's why I think frameworks like this can really be helpful in generating this narrative and activating all the stakeholders we need to generate lasting impact in the city landscape.
Wonderful. Any other thoughts on that opportunities?
Maybe one point that I think of, if you're talking specifically about the source to sea approach, what I like about it is that it brings together different sectors. And I think of our board member who's actually in charge of our biodiversity, water and health portfolio at ICLEI. He's the mayor of a small municipality in the Philippines. And he spoke about how he faced really food security challenges in the city they were working with. And of course he said, well, as the mayor, what can you do to make sure there's more food available? Well, not very much directly within the city. But what he did start was a coastal mangrove restoration project at large scale in that city. And he speaks about how over a period of about a decade, working on that ecosystems-based approach, which is around coastal management, linking it to freshwater investments to try and keep the water clean, led to a massive increase in their local tourism business that even was resilient enough to weather the COVID period of downturn. And it really had an impact on this local economy. And I think that's really what Source to Sea opens you up to. And Lindsay, you also spoke about the business opportunities over there. You look across those value chains. And I think Source to Sea is really a platform of bringing together these diverse range of stakeholders in that way.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank our panelists again and the ones online. We have a wealth of information and knowledge here. I feel very privileged to have been able to host this panel, and thanks again.